Hello, everyone. Um, I, well, Happy New Year is probably the first thing I should say. I hope everyone's doing well. I haven't done an update in a while because Christmas has just been, as you can see, extremely choppy and sideways, and we didn't really have much new on Bitcoin, or we didn't have anything new on Bitcoin particularly until this weekend. Um, the alts obviously have moved a bit, so I want to make this stream mostly about alts. I'll do a very quick update of Bitcoin and Ether first. And then, yeah, look at alts and just have a think about some of the structures because obviously alts, everybody's all excited because alts have moved up. I haven't actually followed that many people to see whether they're now calling for alt season again as per normal or whether people are being more wary this time. There's a lot of alt structures that are really bad. So while we may have an up move and sure we can have a retracement, a correction or whatever, to assume things are going to go from, in many cases, all-time lows to new all-time highs is highly debatable. And we've got a lot of things coming into major 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 6 month, 1 year supply. Not necessarily coming into them, some are coming into them, but many are still quite a lot further away. So we could get a decent move up into those zones, but we need to be very wary of thinking, oh yes, now they're all going to break those zones because there's no reason for them to break those zones as yet. So alts have been hard. They, maybe I'll get onto that a bit more when I actually look at the chart. There's been a lot of chop and it's been quite hard to sort of figure out when the bottom is, and that's mainly because of those giant wicks that we had from back in October. And some of them have gone down and broken the wick, others have retraced to various points in the wick and to previous zones. Not all the exchanges wicked in the same way, so the zones are all very different. Like Binance, I think, wicked the most, but if you like look at Coinbase on some of the charts, they just didn't wick anywhere near as much. So it's hard to know if those demand zones are then still going to be valid. And in some cases they have been picked up as support, and in other cases they haven't. So it's been pretty hard. Alts have now bounced and given, in many cases, 4 or 5 day demands below, and in some cases 1 week, 2 week, and I think the odd 3 week. But again, whether they hold when in many cases they're also hitting monthly supply when they're coming back down from monthly supply is also highly debatable. So I'm still doing what I always do, alerting in both directions and just being conscious of the risks involved, and the timing is something you really need to be concerned with. So yeah, I don't know why that frame rate drops came up in the middle of my screen. Anyway, I guess I've got my camera on this monitor. Yeah, so on the case of Bitcoin, yeah, not much change. We're still in this giant 3 monthly demand that we've been in, since October, is that? Or no, since November. Or I think we first hit it near the start of November, and now we're still in this giant 3 month zone, which is still holding. So the macro bias is still up. This was the green circle cross was the kind of area that I was looking for to hopefully get into longs if we're holding this up structure. I again won't go into it, but there's various things that make me nervous on the high time frames, the comparisons that I've made back to this structure in 2021, the fact we now have monthly supply above that out of there. Various things to be concerned with. However, at the moment, we are still holding a tentative looking uptrend. Yeah, we've also broken this very long-term diagonal. So there are some bearish things going on. And I'm always wary, and there's always probabilities to trade in both directions anyway. But from the macro perspective, this is still 3 month demand. Even if we drop to the 3 month below, I'm still okay with it because I still see this as this is debatable whether this is an actual up move or whether it's just a FOMO stop hunt of the higher kind of B wave. So if this was an A, B, then we could still have a C, and that C can still go to this 3 month zone, and I'd still be okay with it. Even if we drop lower, we then have annual demand down at 46. So none of that's changed. And there are no new zones on the monthly or anything on this. So mostly what I've been doing the last couple of weeks is looking at just adding in the monthlies and the 3 month and all that to the alts. So nothing new in the case of that on Bitcoin or on Ether. Still got this monthly supply up here. If we get up here, then we're looking for shorts. The more aggressive short would be on 5-day and there, and then obviously I've had lower time frame things on there. On the long side, it's been a little bit harder. I'll show you the low time frame chart in a minute. The long side has been a bit harder because I wasn't looking at this a great deal over Christmas, but I kept thinking, well, it looks like we're going to go and take the stops underneath there, which then we didn't do. We just then ground up from there. And because I tend to be better at shorting, I've just looked mainly for shorts through this area. Obviously, there were longs in here as well. It did make a daily demand. I think I did some sort of verbal comments about it in the group, but not anything significant, although I didn't actually add any alerts for those zones because it's very hard to know if it was going to wick. Similarly, when we've gone onto if you've gone to the lower time frames, we've got so many of these bar type structures, the bigger ones and then the smaller ones, that again, it's been hard to know. It's been hard to find decent zones to shorten long. So I haven't got many longs through here. What we do have now is a new 2-week demand. So we have made this large 2-week in here, and I have alerted that as of today into this 8-hour zone. And there was also a CME gap here that's just been filled. And we've got a lower CME gap from, I think that was the New Year close, the 1st of January close down here. So again, that was my other reservation about looking for longs. But then given we have this 2-week demand, I kind of thought, well, at least we might get a scalp off it, and we have. And then we just need to see. So we're in this scenario where we're just in a correction. So it's not bullish, it's not bearish, it's just sideways. And therefore, you can short the top of the range, you can long the bottom of the range until the range breaks, and then we'll reconsider. Once we start making new demand, then we can start kind of gaining a bias. So with this 2-week, just hide things so you can see, with this 2-week demand that's been made here, there's no reason you can't long off that for a new all-time high if you want to. We are in the bigger 3 month. However, most people who follow me and myself are traders and scalpers, not investors and holders. But if you're an investor, there's absolutely nothing wrong with longing in here. Keep your stop somewhere down here, or just buy a little bit and just see what happens here. See if we get up to new highs. From the lower time frame perspective, I'm still quite wary. And one of the reasons I'm wary, apart from the fact it's this time of year, there's very little volume. I've been looking at the ETF data. There's been buying and selling both sides, but it's just different each day. So we'll have a couple of days of buying and then the next couple of days of selling. So it's not very useful to see where the sentiment is there. But again, from those comparisons that I've made to back here in 2021, apart from anything else, you can see the volatility is much, much lower. Here was much more volatile. But we also, at this point, we had made a 3-week demand. Our frame rate drops again. Maybe I need to, I don't know, we just had to put up with it. So we had made a 3-week demand here, but then it came up into, I think there's a 2-week supply, and that didn't quite hit the 3-week, and then just dropped straight through it. So for that reason, if we are following a similar structure to here, I'm slightly wary of this 2-week. And it's weaker in general anyway. At least this has had a decent move up. It had hit supply, but it had a decent move up over the previous consolidation. So there are some differences, and the other difference obviously is that this doesn't have supply immediately above. It's only got the 5-day is the next one, and that's still around 102k. So pros and cons make it a little bit difficult. So nothing new, as I say, on the high time frame on that. I'll just quickly look at the low time frame. So on the short side, so this is just an update because I think the previous, so many arrows, I can't even remember when my previous update was, but obviously you can see I was looking for shorts and getting some decent shorts through this area. Then coming up when it started to break out, obviously they started to fail. And then even here, I think there was a daily supply, which I thought was worth, the daily supply here, I thought was worth watching for a move off that, particularly because I think it hit on a weekend. Yeah, it was on the Sunday. But if I go down to the lower time frame, you can see, it rejected a little bit below the level, and then when it came back to the level, it went through it. And then I was just giving commentary on these. There were some stops here that you can see to the left that I thought might get taken out, which they did, but again, didn't drop. And it was kind of unusual, I think, for a Sunday. Like normally we would get, well, it was actually on Monday that it started to move. Like normally you'd get a move down into demand first. The only thing which I hadn't considered, because I wasn't close enough to the chart at the time, was that Korea at this point hit the 2-week demand, or weekly demand, I think maybe on Korea. So that was possibly part of this push that we had in Asia, or at the end of Sunday, the end of New York. I can't remember. Maybe it was a little bit later, but yeah, Korea, I'm pretty sure hit the weekly demand at this point, which could have propelled that move. Then I added in a new short here. My preference was still potentially to take out stops through here. However, it appeared, and also I just know how people trade. So even if we didn't necessarily get a big move off there, I thought we'd get some move off there. It hit on the was that the Tuesday morning? Again, Tuesday taking out Monday's high. So yeah, I sort of set that alert for a possible short there. Then I said, we made a 30-minute supply, worth looking for a retest as a question mark because I didn't alert it, I just commented it. And then I put another alert for a 10-minute supply short there. So that worked pretty well. And then now down in here, then like I said, there was a CME. You can see the CME close there, moved over with the rest of my stuff. So the CME gap was in here. So I said, we're going to fill that or potentially look at filling that. We're going to bounce at the top of this 2-week. We're going to bounce, but there is a chance we'll bounce at the top of this 2-week. I said we might dip a bit lower because CME, the 2-week was a little bit lower. So hence I've gone a little bit inside, although in fact, I think it took out this 12-hour zone just on the wick down here before the bounce. And now we're up in 8-hour supply, so we just need to see the reaction. Again, I haven't been too aggressive on the shorts because of this. So, well, for a few reasons, because we're in 2-week demand, because we had this trend line and we could just run through. Initially, I did just have this alert up here for 8-hour supply at the top, but I added this in today thinking, yeah, I don't want to be too conservative either. It's kind of a nice 2-hour zone in there. So we can see what happens if we hit that. Although still in the immediate, this would be the very aggressive short entry that we've hit now. This is up in obviously the premium area, 61 fib or higher. And then to the downside, as I've said, we've got those stops in the circle. I think I've had these alerts I've talked about before, just for hourly demand, and if we're going to make a higher low from there. But I was maybe I've added those actually. I think this was the one I had from my previous update. Various things below anyway, but none of them I consider particularly high probability because there's so much chop. And because I think, if we do come down here, if this doesn't hold where we are now, and then we do come down into this area, chances of us filling the gap are pretty high, which is this lower arrow. And then the chances if we get there of us taking out all the stops are also pretty high. So we'll see. Anyway, I think that's about it on Bitcoin. Just quickly on the fuckery that we've had today. So this is the Coinbase walls. So you can see that there was this massive stack of walls put in this afternoon or just going into New York, which has held the price up. And this is fairly unusual for Coinbase. I don't really know what it means. I'm just commenting on it so you can see things I'm looking at or what to be aware of. So it did eventually get eaten into. These walls didn't get pulled. They got sold into. And then price held the lower one and bounced. So that's always something to be aware of, again, if you were trying to short in that area, apart from the fact that I wouldn't short at the top of 2-week demand anyway. This is what held the price up there, and obviously they've now been pulled out. So if we do come back down here, I wouldn't expect us necessarily to hold a higher low at this point. Has made an hourly demand in here, or 2-hourly demand, I think, in here, so we can see. And then generally the walls, and this doesn't necessarily align that well with my current potential entries, which I think the 3-month is at 71k, but there are walls at the moment at the 75 area. So that would be 75 on Coinbase. Something strange going on. Yeah, it's coming up 75 on Coinbase. So you can see that I'm confused because you can see there in that pop-up it's come up as 81,000, those walls there, yet we're at 75 on the axis, which might just mean I need to refresh the page. But I'm guessing these are in the sort of 75k area as well. It's now looking like 70. I think there's something gone funny with the axis, so maybe that's 81k, and in fact 75 is quite a lot lower. I'm not sure. I'd have to refresh the page. Grading light. There's my frame drop showing again. Trading light has still got various problems, so this is not a great thing to look at. Yeah, for looking at the immediate walls, and obviously those walls below can change at any time as well as and if price starts to go down. Yeah, so that's that on Bitcoin. Back to this Ether, same comments apply. The only thing with Ether is, I really did want it to get down into this green area. I feel like I've lost some drawings off these charts. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I've deleted things by mistake, or they're supposed to be high time frame charts, so they shouldn't have as many lines, but they do. But that's me. If you follow me at any period of time, I'm just going to hide the alert lines at least so we can see a bit better. So we are again 7% with Bitcoin in a giant 3-month demand. We have a 1 month inside it, which is the zone I kind of wanted to get hit. I had this front run entry. There was a 12-hour demand here, which I think again took a wick through, and it took a wick down into this consolidation, but just didn't quite hit that area. So for the same typical reasons, I don't like being front run, and I tend to find, not always, but I tend to find if I get front run, then price will come back for me. Not Bitcoin being the one exception on the very high time frames. Even Bitcoin normally will come back for you, but like for example at the 16k low, we actually had entries assuming a front run, and it did front run the actual zone, but Ether is less inclined to do that. But so yeah, the same applies on Ether as to Bitcoin. Like there's nothing new in the entries that I've got above. It's still got what's that, weekly supply? I think it didn't make a monthly in here, no. So there's no monthly, so there's this sort of weekly zone here, 61 fib. It's a whole lot of chop up here, but again in the bigger picture. So there's a few things in the bigger picture. A quick recap, like we've taken out all-time high, but we have a 3-month demand, so it's conflicting for me. Like this can be seen as a giant range, and given we've taken out all-time high and been unable to break out, we could come and take out this low, which if it was a lower time frame chart and wasn't Ether, I would think was perfectly reasonable and realistic, because this level here is 700, is an annual level that hasn't been tapped, so it's an annual demand. However, then we've got the conflict that we have 3-month demand in here. We've got a monthly inside it. Obviously, we're still in this sort of local uptrend. It's just a question of the same structures I talked about a lot on alts and majors and the total market cap charts, is whether this is an A wave, this is a B wave, and in this case, an extended B wave because it's taken out high, and whether we're going to get a C wave either down lower or into some sort of a triangle form. That's very basic correction, but we have seen that. So we saw that, and I'll show you again on the others chart in a minute, like where the wicks from October, so here in this case it's only a little wick, but where this wick here on the others chart comes all the way down to here. So anyway, yeah, Ether, like I said, not much new. There's this monthly demand here. If we drop lower, we also made a new 2-week demand, the same as Bitcoin. So again, I alerted the top of that. CME gap is lower inside. So again, just following similar to Bitcoin, it was just a question is if we're going to get the issue with corrections, I guess, is that I want to short up here. I may or may not get that. Or maybe it's going to turn bullish if this 3-month demand decides to actually kick in properly. But I don't necessarily, it's a question of how much this is going to retrace before you expect. So if this is just a basic A wave, like where's this B wave going to come to? Now, typically we'd say the 61 fib would be ideal. And then you're looking for either a zigzag or, as I said previously, a triangle. So those are the two common options unless we're going to get some sort of a complex correction. The problem is it doesn't have to get up to the 61. Maybe that's it. Maybe this is just a little kind of triangle here, and then we're just going to bear flag it down from here. So we have to just look at what supply and demand are in place, and in this case, we do have this 2-week demand, got a 4-day, 3-day, etc. inside it. So there's possibility now that either this just hangs out here a little bit and does follow the triangle pattern, or that we get another move up off this, and we're still doing, you know, a correction here, an extended correction before dropping. This is all assuming we're dropping. Obviously, we may not drop, but those are the zones that we would look for shorts. And this is the zone that I prefer for longs. Yeah, so that's that on Ether again. Nothing new compared to what I've said previously, just zones above, and there's a whole lot of chop and zones above. The only thing in, like, a main thing in Ether's favor is that it does have so many untested zones and this trend line up here that it could, if it does want to run, it could just run through everything from this. So be aware of that, and no blind shorting up here or blind longs even unless we get into this zone. So similarly, if you're an investor, if you want to trade this 2 week, if you're happy holding on if it comes down here, or if it comes lower, I'd be wary of that. But if you want to trade this 2 week with a stop like locally, just to see if you're going to get an all-time high from here, there's nothing wrong with that. But from a trading perspective, there are other considerations. So then back to, again, the low time frame chart on Ether. It's been similar on the low time frames. Again, same as Bitcoin, I've been less inclined to look for longs because we had these stops left behind here, and this is, I don't like these consolidations when we have big pump candles here, because again, it's like how deep is it going to come? Is it going to come back for these stops? So again, same as Bitcoin, it left a whole bunch of stops underneath here and just took off. And I wasn't monitoring enough to get any long entries until now. I've also commented previously that we had this sort of mess. So we had a 12-hour, we had a 12-hour supply here, we had a 12-hour supply here, we had a 12-hour supply here. And I think I commented in my previous video that I was alerting all of them, and then you just see what happens when they get there. So again, that one, when it hit, good reaction. This one, not so good reaction. I think we've got some low time frame stuff, and then finally have got a decent reaction. In fact, this, so in the case of Ether, actually, again, it just slightly front ran my entry at the top. I did comment for the group CME, and I think Korea had hit, CME had hit this zone. Korea, I think, is relatively lower, and I think maybe it hit in there, but Korea and CME were both at resistance. So that was reasonable to look for a short, even if it looked like it might come back for that second pump. So again, I was waiting in the hope that it would take out the high into this entry, but I didn't get that, but we got the shorts on Bitcoin instead. So again, that's why I like to play these two off against each other, because sometimes one is going to be keener and more high probability than the other. So yeah, similar to Bitcoin, again, I was a little bit too aggressive on shorts here just for the weekend. It was mainly because it was the weekend through here, and weekend normally doesn't have that much movement, or at least Saturday doesn't. So this was a sort of Saturday hopeful. Then Sunday, I think the alert went. And then it came back for it. As I said, there was a couple of possibilities, just low time frame, just trading a little bit too low time frame there for such a big move up. And then finally went and took out the high. And then as of today, like, it took its time getting down into this zone, but it has had quite a clean move off that 2 week demand, just about the 61 fib there. And then, yeah, similar to Bitcoin, it's got CME gap closed down here in this chop and this 4 day, big 4, I think 3 day, I think there's a 4 day, and then there's a 3 day demand there. So it's just difficult. Then we've got a 12-hour, 8-hour. And then, as I said, my preference would be down in this circle really for the higher time frame stuff. So yeah, I just need to see what build up we get here. Short side similar to Bitcoin as well. Like, I'd had an alert up here for this 2 hour, which I was hoping would get tested, but didn't. And then similarly, I added another one. I think that's a 2 hour supply in there, similar to Bitcoin, in case we get some sort of. And again, as I said, it's hard to judge on these because I don't know if we're going to get some BARTs. Just these spikes, which we've been getting lately, which we could spike up and even take out the high, particularly now off 2 week demand. So yeah, the other disclaimer on both Bitcoin and Ether is that if we have hit this 2 week demand, so any of the short entries are what we call risk entries. So at the moment, we are in an immediate uptrend on a bigger macro demand. However, locally, it's hard to explain. It's just all the competing timeframes, I guess. So we've got obviously this big demand here. This is Ether, big demand, 3 month demand. Then in that, we're making this little local uptrend. So that's why I say the 2 week demand is in this local uptrend. So that could give us another wave up to take out the high. Then in the opposing time frame, we've got this downtrend, which is bounded at the moment by this 5-day supply. So at the moment we're in this downtrend. So it's a question, are you trading the big uptrend based on the 3-month? Are you trading the mini uptrend based on the 2-week in here? Or are you trading the downtrend based on the 5-day supply rejection? That's why it's always a competing time frame. So this, and note this as well, this is 5-day supply hit in here. This is a lower high. So this is a week, 2-week demand as well as the other consideration. So as I said, this might be that triangle. I should probably draw that properly. This could still be a triangle, which again could break either way. It kind of looks like it's just wicked, gone up through that triangle slightly. It depends exactly how you draw it, but so it could be a little bit of a fake out of the triangle. And then now we just need to see. And then obviously we've broken this bigger trend line up. So there's so many considerations at the moment, and in a correction, it makes it a little bit tougher. Anyway, I'm going to move on to quickly on US dollar dominance. So US dollar dominance and all the other stablecoin dominances had made a 2-week supply last week to counter Bitcoin's 2-week demand. Not a very strong supply. It's a little bit stronger on USDC dominance, and that hasn't tested it yet. But you can see here on US dollar tether dominance has tested it, and is weak as well because it hasn't actually broken the low. So that is, I guess, in the market's favor of potentially this being going bullish. That's one hope for the market. And then similarly, you can see down here at the bottom, we had a similar kind of chop before the reversal. So maybe we'll get some sort of that kind of chop up here first. Overall, I am bullish on this. So this did make a 3-month demand in here. So I am bullish on this, and therefore that makes me more bearish on Bitcoin, or at least on alts. Again, it's a huge zone. So while I don't alert this chart as such, but while I've got a cross at the top, just so you can see the top of the 3-month, but then there's various zones inside. So obviously it can still retrace significantly deeper inside of this. Again, we've got a kind of nice inverse head and shoulders going on. What else? But then again, it's still in range. But I did want another up move on this. It's just a question of how much it's going to retrace first. So if we fib this whole move, it's possible the 61's down here. So it's possible we retrace all the way back down here, which obviously then gives Bitcoin quite a lot of leeway to go up first. This was a scribble I did back, when we hit the high in November. There's no method in this. I didn't necessarily think it was going to bounce there. Specifically, it was just saying maybe we're going to do a sideways thing, comparing back to that 2021. If we're comparing 2021 for Bitcoin, then we compare that here as well. 2022 now, in fact. Again, we had this sort of chop around here. So I was saying maybe we'll get this chop around here first. So it's still continuing to look a little bit similar to 2021, but with less volatility. Okay, so I'm going to move off of that for now and then go on to the market cap chart. So again, won't spend too much time. Total is basically looking like Bitcoin, nothing really new there. Also got the 2-week demand. Total 2, the same. Again, more like Ether has hit supply. Got the 2-week demand, still in the giant 3-month demand. Again, these things are hitting zones that I wanted. So in this case, this is the one that's most similar to Ether. Total 2 actually has hit that monthly zone where Ether hasn't. So that's of interest in itself. Total 3, which tends to more resemble what the majors are doing. Again, in this big 3-month demand. And this is the one when, again, similar to Ether, start to get a lot more wary of it, because again, we've taken out this all-time high twice and still been unable to have a significant break up from there. And I know there are some people calling this an ascending triangle and saying it's going to break up, but to me it still really looks like a double top inside a double top or a triple top. Yeah, so again, I would like to see a decent retracement on this, but that really is going to murder alts and majors, so it's a tough one. Having said that, we are in 3 months. Well, actually, has this got a yearly? Okay, so it had a yearly from last year, so it's not the best yearly, but having said that, you know, these were the two areas that I was looking for longs, and we're still holding that kind of zone. So possibly, again, the optimistic move, I'll get to it, like I've done the projections on others, which I showed in my previous video. But you know, obviously the optimistic is even as if we get some sort of a move, you know, even if it's a correction of this and not just another up wave. So there's some that will say this is another up wave. For me, I see this again, we had a strong impulse here. This is very corrective. Yes, it happens to have taken out the high. But again, like I want to see when this is the case, then I tend to want to see this come down because this move is so much weaker than the original impulse. I want to see it come back down and take out the start of that move. And in this case, into proper demand, because even the start of this move didn't really hit proper demand. It hit 3 month, this giant 3 month, but it didn't retrace. Take everything off again. Didn't retrace to the start of this last strong move. So at the very least, and again, I still consider this quite optimistic. There's various other reasons it could end up all the way back down here, and or lower, back in this annual demand. Again, like when people don't want to see it, I mean, this is a crypto cap chart. It's not, you know, it would obviously, if we came all the way back down to 200, that's a fifth of what it is now. So that obviously means a huge amount has left the crypto market, and it would have to be something fairly major happening for that to be the case. I mean, maybe it gets regulated and everything gets on traditional exchanges. So there's the, you know, this crypto market as we know it, with this presumably adding up all the traditional crypto exchanges. I'm not sure actually. It's kind of interesting. I wonder if they, in this market cap, whether they're adding in the ETFs and things like that now, or whether it's still just the exchanges like Binance, etc. Not really sure. Anyway, this is made similar to everything else. 2 week demand here, so and that's what we see on the majors. So majors were very similar to this. Like some of them made higher lows here, others didn't. You know, they were not that easy to get into. They were all had this. They all had this trendline stops above. And I'd commented before that, you know, I was setting alerts various through here on various of the majors. Quite a few of them have hit. Some have gone a little bit higher, at least. I think most of them are actually holding the major zones. I think the only ones that may have broken, I think maybe Ripple, where I put a slightly aggressive 12-hour supply. So the ones where I put the lower time frame, I think maybe 1 or 2 have gone through, but anything with the higher time frame similar to this is, I think, is pretty much holding. So yeah, again, with the majors and with the alts, what we're looking for is, you know, the test here would be aggressive on test on the top of the 2 week, test here. Risk being a lot of the alts have left trendline stops. A lot of the alts have left space here, you know, where they potentially could have come back and tested, you know, even on the lower time frames, disregarding the fact that I think it could go here. They've left trendline stops. They haven't necessarily bounced in very good places at the lows, although hard to judge because of the wick. So I think, you know, it's kind of each alt to its own. And then finally, well, not finally, others, but so the red and the green lines are new. If you followed my previous video, you would know this, and I think I posted this chart a few times, so this is a complete mess now, so I apologize for that. The reason it's a mess now in this giant brown up here is it made 3 months supply. And it's not a very good 3 month supply, but it is a 3 month supply. So again, it's not strong, because it hasn't made a new low, hasn't broken below that low, but so this can still optimistically be a sideways consolidation. We can still go significantly up inside it, but we have closed below this candle and it has come up inside to test it. Similarly, we already had a 2 month, and that was what I talked about previously. And that's where I said that, like, that would be the kind of the bounce that I wanted provisionally. And then if we got an optimistic bounce, then maybe we'd go higher and take out some of the stops. So I think there's, just check, run through the time frames. Yeah, so then I was saying maybe we'd go higher and take out the stops. These little trend line stops. With my drawings back. Yeah, so apologies for all the brown messes, but it's because we made this 3 month supply. We already had the bigger 3 month supply. We made a new 3 month supply, and we already had the 2 month supply in there. So it is a bit of a mess. But so what I talked about previously is we'd left a lot of these little trend line stops through here, and we took out a few of those ones at the top with this first bounce that we had, and then kind of November, where we had a few of the alts went a bit weirdly crazy. And then we had a few more lower time frame stops left here, and then a few more there. And then I kept saying on this, that I was looking for some sort of bounce, and this was the optimistic scenario. Like my bias is still down and is very much still down, even with this 3-month supply, 2-month supply in here. It's just a question of, again, how much retracement could we get? And initially I'd kind of said optimistically we could go all the way up, retrace it all the way up here if we wanted. Then I said, well, we made 2-month supply, so actually it's more likely that we're probably going to reject there. But again, we can keep an eye on it. We do have trend line stops above, and a lot of the alts are the same. They have a 2-month supply, and a lot of those 2-month supplies are now converted to 3-month supplies now. And a lot of them have trend line stops. So now I don't think, maybe 1 or 2 have gone through those zones, but I think most of them are holding at the moment. Then the question now, so we have had the rejection, obviously, in the circle that I drew in that 2-month level. Take some of the other levels out so we can see a bit better. And now, as I said, we've made 2-day demand, 3-day demand, 5-day demands, a whole load of chop down here. We have trend line stops below. Like I say, some of the alts have got weeklies in there and things like that. So we might see kind of a mix as usual. We see a mix where some alts are going to hold more aggressively and bounce more aggressively, and others are just going to go plow through this. And again, I had a few of these, I think, hit yesterday, the day before, and they're the ones that have just ended up going through. And then I've had a whole bunch hit today, so now we're just watching those to see what happens. But as I say, I'm not happy with this trend line below, and I'm not happy with the fact we're coming off 2-month supply here. So the green line would be the optimistic scenario where we do hold these new demands and we get a bounce that takes us higher inside the 2-month supply, or maybe up to the weekly if we're lucky. And then the red scenario, unfortunately, I think is the higher probability scenario where maybe we get some scalps off this level. Maybe we get some alts that outperform at that point, but the chances are that we're going to end up down here or lower. And again, remember my bias on this bigger picture scenario is this it's head and shoulders, not inverse head and shoulders. It's the head and shoulders. It's the double top. It's the untested yearly demand down here. It's the weakness generally of alts. And like one of my big issues was always that everybody said, oh, now we're going to have, we had Bitcoin run and now we're going to have the rotation into alts. And I'm like, but why, like ETFs bought Bitcoin? Or people who bought ETFs who bought Bitcoin via the ETF. Why are those people who are institutional investors who are pushing Bitcoin up going to rotate into Pepe and Farcoin? Seems legit. Anyway, that's my view. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. I mean, like at some point, I think when the market goes bullish, I think alts will run, but I just don't think it's a rotation. I think to say it's a rotation to me is a bit mental, but maybe I'm wrong. Has been known, not very often. Anyway, yeah, so my macro view on this has always been more bearish. Again, like what I talked about on the risk on Ether is that we have, we had this big pump up here, and then we have an A wave, a B wave, and then a C wave, which potentially triangle or zigzag could go significantly lower. So we'll just have to see, and these are very high time frame. Obviously, it takes. We talked about this. Been talking about this scenario since we came down here back at the end of 2024. That was that circle. It was like we're going to work our way up here, and then I'm looking for shorts. There's possibly we still hold this demand. This is a head and shoulders, but it is still holding higher lows by the skin of its teeth, lower high, but also kind of just about a higher low. Broken that trend line, so I should still have that in there, but. Anyway, yeah, so those are my lower time frame thoughts on others that potentially wait for a move down into here. Hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, it's not going to retrace even all the way down there. Like if the market does go very bullish, it can do that, but it's not my bias from here. And when we've just had, we're having a test here on 3-month supply and 2-month supply inside it, I can't be particularly bullish based on that. So I want to see alts when they get down into here based on each individual alt. And then we'll see. Total DeFi, I was slightly more optimistic about. I'm not sure if this includes Ether, but this one I've always been slightly more bullish on. I mean, it's still got the same head and shoulders, which I don't like, but I think the DeFi dominance maybe looks a little bit better than the other dominance charts. But I mean, really, it still follows the same structure. You know, it's still got a lower high here. It's still potentially a B wave, and it's always just a consolidation through here. However, this does tend to hold demands a bit better. It did have a monthly demand in here. Obviously, the wick came into it, has still held that level, so that's in its favor. Actually, did others take out the wick? No, so others, the wick is just a lot lower. So, and again, has to add the 2 week demand. So, I don't even know which the DeFi coins are for the most part, but I know like ARV, for example, is the one that I always think of. I know the structure on that has historically been significantly more bullish. It tends to have monthly demands and 3 monthly demands when everything else is making those things in supply. So total DeFi, yeah, so like looking at some of those DeFi coins when they come back into here, I think it's worth doing. I'll get onto the dominant stuff in a minute. But yeah, I tend to think this is normally a little bit stronger. And then total E100 again is significantly weaker. I only think sort of lost some. I remember my levels all there. Yes. Okay, so the problem I had, same on total E100 and on those 4 circles you just saw on the flip to the either total E100 dominance chart. But again, it's like, are we going to have the bearish rejection in here, which in this case we have? Are we going to move up to weekly supply in there? You know, then we've got, well, actually, in fact, this is weekly, but now this is also 3 months supply in there. So again, this has made a major supply up. I think DeFi hasn't. Let's go back to DeFi quickly. No, so DeFi doesn't, at least in DeFi's favor, it hasn't made a monthly or a 3 month supply. So yeah, so in the case of totally 100 and others, so more of the shit coins, like again, this has got a 3 month supply, so we could get a move up higher. Take those circles out again, so we could get a move up higher in this area, but again, very, very hard to judge while we're still floating. So we're in a giant 3 month demand here, we're wicked deep into it. Recall that they did give us all the history when they first released these new charts, and then they decided to hide it because, I don't know, I think they think it's not accurate or something, but I still have the boxes drawn in, thankfully. So we're still in this giant 3 month demand. Like, I'd really like to come down into this annual zone. And that was kind of where I was originally looking at annual, obviously a 3 month inside the annual. It already had the bounce off the top of the 3 month over there. Now is wick deeper inside it, and now is just sort of consolidating inside the wick. So again, hard to judge where the actual low might be because of this wick. So is this the low? Hard to judge when you haven't got any of the chart either. Similar to others, have these trend line stops, has taken the whole first set of them. He's rejected off that 3 day supply at the bottom there, and it's also a 3 week, and then has this 3 month a bit higher. If again we're going to get, so we could get another move. It doesn't have to come all the way down to here again, but we could get a move up into this zone. Optimistic would be to get up into that zone. If they're much the same as others, it's a question of how much retracement might we get off here. And I will say on these, you know, if I end up being wrong in the macro, maybe that's the bottom and we're going to have a massive bull season now. But that's fine. But what I want to see to prove that is firstly some demand holding and secondly some supply breaking. And the difficulty with the supply is it's so messy and choppy. So go back to others quickly. Like, it's very hard to judge on this. I hide my drawings, which make it harder to judge. You know, what waves we're looking at because of that wick. So these are kind of waves down, and that's fine. And you know, arguably we've broken. It's not really definitive, so we've broken a swing high there. But it's such a chop. It's very hard to judge. But you know, we are at support here, like I said. So maybe we're going to find and you know get some sort of bottom like this. But what I need to see is some demand holding. So I need to see that supply reject, demand hold, and then to start to see some alts with some strength. And then you can start getting into the laggers on that run. The major difference between here and here is that we now have this 2 month or 2 month and 3 month supply, whereas those didn't. I think they might have had monthly. So we did have a monthly supply here, but obviously it rejected, immediately offered and came back down. But then, and then went straight back up through it on the second run. But yeah, so my bias is still, like I still struggle to be anything but down, but I like to try and be open to the prospect of maybe at least we can get a decent rally, even if it's down ultimately, up to this area, for example. So we shall see. That was on the total. So yeah, totally 100. It's actually a bit cleaner than the others chart at least, but taking those trend line stops, it's got some more above. Want to see the test if it comes back into here. Is this going to hold? And we're going to get another run for alts. And this will be, even if it just does this, it's a nice mini run on alts that will give some decent alt moves. Probably quite a lot of them. Then the dominances. BTC dominance made a 3 week supply. BTC dominance is just, I don't know why I bother looking at this, because this just entirely throws me off. So it made a 3 week supply, and there it also made a 2 week slightly below, which it rejected. But the problem is, the reason I don't like it is, so Bitcoin's gone up a little bit today, but we seem to have a real decent up move on dominance. Yesterday, Bitcoin came down and dominance is up. And I don't know if that's must be the movement between this and alts. And I think this, Tuesday, Tuesday, that was when we started to come down, to be fair. Yeah, I don't know, this doesn't necessarily, so dominance has dropped this whole period, is when BTC has been going sideways / up, and this dominance has dropped the entire time. And I guess that's because alts have been going up more. But then when you think of US dollar dominance, I suppose it has been coming down it's been coming down over the same period. So I guess that maybe that's telling us money's flowing into alts. But anyway, I just don't find it overly useful. The BTC dominance doesn't help me particularly. Maybe I just can't get my head around it well enough. Ether dominance is more reliable, but also just looks like Ether BTC really. So this made a 3 week demand. So Ether BTC did come off that 3 week demand on Tuesday, but this chart hasn't yet, so it'd be kind of interesting to see whether we get a reaction here with maybe Ether BTC going a bit lower inside the zone. Again, just between, I didn't talk about Ether BTC really, but between rock and hard place. So we're in a 2 week demand down here, 2 week supply up here. Just which way is it going to break is the burning question. So we just need to see. Now we're just right slap bang between the two. So if you were trading this chart, I wouldn't be trading anything on this. It's just waiting and seeing what it's going to do, or giving some new demand. Or at least it's made that 3 weeks. So if you were trading the chart, you could just blindly long the 3 week with your stop down here and just see if that's going to make it take off. Again, at higher zones that haven't been tested. Others dominance, sort of similar scenario to what I was saying on the others chart. Yearly supply, 6 monthly supply up here now. Is that yearly? Oh no, sorry, it's not yearly. That was the previous yearly demand. So 6 month supply up there now, 2 month and 6 month supply. But also again, it's got a 3 month supply. So right there, it's just closed below, made a 3 month supply. So if we have a great quarter and this can close up here at the end of the quarter, then maybe we have hope for an alt season. But right now, while we're underneath, we can't say that. Similarly, even if we have a good January and make a monthly demand here, this green candle closes higher and that makes a monthly demand. Again, maybe that gives us opening for an alt season. So those are the things you'd be looking at in the end of the month and then the end of March. But for now, we are in 3 month supply. I had the circle at the 3 day inside, and we are rejecting off that. So 3 week a little bit higher, and we are still kind of really just trickling in this downtrend, holding a 6 month level at the low. So that's kind of decent. So, maybe there's hope for others' dominance. Total DeFi dominance, as I said, I'm more hopeful in general. It held monthly at the low. So total DeFi dominance is a much nicer chart in general. And that wick, I actually kind of like this chart, but it's the only things I don't like. Again, we've just got the major supply. So while if you hide everything, it looks like a nice chart. But when I trade supply and demand, when I look at it like this, I'm like, okay, well, it's made an annual supply. So yeah, sure, it can come all the way back up here and maybe tap into that, take out the previous year's high. It's rejected off 6 months supply there, and then the next demand is all the way down there. So it's just two ways of looking at things. There are two major ways that I look at things. So I'm looking at the what's the up structure here. So we have a big up move, but then I'm looking at what new supply is formed, because those are areas that are obviously going to be massive risk if you were then to try, if you were longing this chart and you were trying to long, you're then left with a lot of supply above that's going to push you back down again. And that's kind of what's happened consistently here. So we had obviously monthly supply or 3 monthly supply up there, and it came back into it, rejected and dropped out, made monthly, 3 monthly, another 3 monthly supply up there, and now then probably subsequently a yearly supply drop back down. Now it's in demand, so that's a better sign. It's in like a weekly. Is that a 3 weekly demand down there? 3 weekly chart. No, it's 2 week and then 3 week below. So it has retraced to a decent level of support. It had a decent bounce, but again, straight back up into supply. So until you actually see that supply break and this downtrend break, then it's still in a downtrend. And it doesn't mean you can't buy every rally, but your bias should be more to the short side. Anyway, here, real just chop for the last 3 months. Weekly very much sideways, but has now made a weekly demand here with a 5-day inside it. So it could, again, DeFi maybe gives me a little bit more hope. And then finally, totally E100, and again, just highlights what I've said previously. So in this case, we had the aggressive circle. I think I didn't share this previously. I've drawn this since, but it made a monthly supply. So I was like, okay, maybe that's the first point that it could reject. Then it's got this 3 week inside it. That was my second point. And then it's got a 3 month supply above. So again, this is like indicative of possibly it's going to start trying to take out some stops. There is hope that this is the bottom and this is just a consolidation before taking off, but hard to judge with all the chop above where this might reject. Multiple just kind of different areas and very sort of rough circles, but again, has made a new 5-day demand down here, a 3-day demand and daily inside it. So we just need to see if this is going to hold to give us any sort of push higher. So that's pretty much it on alts. Overarchingly on alts, but so yeah, the TLDR version is, I'm still bearish. I think there's nothing really that can make me not bearish on this. On the high time frame, on the mid time frame, there is hope we could have a mini run. If that mini run happens, and then if it takes out some significant highs, so this is the dominance chart, but if this comes up and takes out these highs, if it then makes a major new demand, so yes, but this is much bigger picture and way down the track. It's got various zones it can get through. It's got to get through first, and really, the very first step, we are in down. Ignore that wick. Retrace down. That's what's happening at the moment. So. Sorry if you're excited about this bounce that we've had this week, but I just can't be overexcited about it quite yet. I'll be more overexcited if we come down into here and get a bounce on others. I'll be much more overexcited if we come down into here and get a bounce. And then I think we could have decent moves, but at the moment we are hitting a demand that's already been hit 4 times. And it's trying to make a higher low when that demand on the 3rd, 4th time has been unable to make a higher high. So this is not what I consider a good looking chart. So where are we at? 54 minutes. I was going to go through the majors and some alts and stuff like that and just show you some examples. But I wonder if I should just leave it at that 54 minutes and then maybe I can do a part 2 tomorrow and actually do some more detail of the majors. Because again, I have been adding some new entries. I haven't added loads, I think, since I updated previously. I think it'll just take a bit too much time to go through these things now. been trying to do a bit of trading in both direction, but yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave this now and I'm going to return tomorrow with a part 2, and I'll go over the majors and some of the alts that we've been looking at. So there's still some decent alts that are doing decent things. But they are, as I said, on the long side, it's been very hard to get into quite a lot of alts. Maybe show you an example on the majors, like ADA, for example. This is the one that got me. So ADA, and I had said that there was risk in these entries. Obviously we had this decent move up here. It did make a 4-day demand. This is why I say we have to wait on the others chart to see if those 4-day demands are going to hold. So you can see there that green candle closed above that made a 4-day demand. It came back, unfortunately, and tested it way too quickly, and in fact was a swing failure of the 4-day anyway. But possibly you would expect to get some sort of a bounce there, but it came and tested it a bit too quickly and then ended up just going straight through it with barely any bounce at all. And then similarly here, kind of looking for the potential for a higher low still. No, it failed. Came down into the next zone. Okay, that's good. I was like, okay, well, we've now come into this area that I wanted to look for longs. But the first bounce, again, just a bit too aggressive. It hadn't properly taken out the high. And then I think it was a 12-hour demand in here that you would hope for a little bit of a bounce, but no, it then went lower low first before pumping up. And in this case, we're now on the case of ADA. So give this as a quick example of one alt. It's now got a 6-month supply. Again, it's offset, so it's not ideal, but this is not something I want to really look for longs on when it's made a 6-month supply here, and that my preferred entry on the 6-month chart would be down at, what's that? 8 cents. Doesn't have to get there, but that would be my preferred entry. And again, so ADA is a really classic example as well, actually, of looking very similar to the others chart, but this is exactly what I drew a long time ago. I was like, this is the strong up move. This is the choppy corrective B wave, and that's what I'm expecting. And it was even similarly on the low time frame on this. I just dragged an alert, disaster. Don't know where I dragged that alert from. Yeah, even on this last choppy move up here, again, it was exactly the same scenario. We had this impulse, we had this correction, this retracement, and then we had this very corrective move up, which I was then expecting to fall off a cliff. So those were predictions. I did this on this a long time ago now, and kind of exactly what's played out. But again, the bigger picture, this is where you want to get entries on this. This is not where I really want to be looking for longs. Doesn't mean it's not going to give a bounce, and that's why I do, but it means I'm much more short biased. We get the bounce. I want to bounce up into here so I can get the short down to, what's that, 26 cents or so. So anyway, now in 6-month supply, so my bias is already short on this. It's just a question again of how high it's going to go into that supply. But yeah, it was pretty hard to get into, and it's made 4-day demand. So again, do I want to then put long entries on these charts? So I've kind of put a whole load on alts just to see what happens, and they're very mixed onto which, but majors I think a bit heavily about. So in this case, because it's coming off like a 2-week supply and a 6-month supply, I'm much less inclined to look for a long on this than, say, BNB, which I put a more aggressive one on because BNB obviously is a much stronger chart in general. And BNB still has the opportunity, even if this is going to remain ultimately bearish, but BNB is still more likely to do this in the same way ADA did, even if it is going to ultimately drop. So BNB, I'm more inclined now to be aggressive. Again, it's come off a weekly demand at the low. It's not as strong as I like. This is very similar to Bitcoin actually, but I put more aggressive alert there because it's made a 2-week demand and it's made a daily in here. So that's got a bit of a bounce today. Whether it's going to do anything significant, I don't know. It also had these equal highs here. So even if it just gets a move up to take out the equal highs, that's fine. We're only scalping this. This doesn't have to enter here for a target of like $1,000+ dollars. So there's that. Link, on the other hand, is 3 months supply in here. So again, I alerted the level just to see, and it's just trickled up inside it a bit. Again, it's exactly the same. It's a huge zone. It doesn't have to come off the bottom there. And I will go over these tomorrow because Link also, like, Link had a 6 month supply last year and it held the 6 month supply, but it went all the way to the top of it first. So again, this is it's saying this new 3 month is just as weak as the previous 6 months. So it is possible that it goes all the way to the top of this 3 month before, even if it's going to play out, before playing out the 3 month. But again, I just set the alert at the bottom just to check the reaction. In contrast, we've got some really nice longs on DOT and Atom. So DOT was just a nice move up. So in contrast to ADA, where it was just painful and just didn't want to hold, this timing, like, that's where the timing's so important, because this timing was just nice on this. DOT came back into that 4-day demand, easy up move. Atom was a little bit harder. So Atom again had hit DOT was just random as well. Actually, DOT hadn't hit anything that I really wanted at the lows. This 1.6 level is really just a nothing level, and it's below all-time low. So it was quite a risky entry there, but paid off. Atom, on the other hand, had hit this weekly. It was wicked through the weekly. I think wicked to take out. Actually, I think that is an all-time low. I think all-time low is still lower, but it had wicked all the way through the weekly, but then came back to test the weekly. So it had the alert there, which you would have seen previously. And then I think I talked about these ones in my previous video, where it was just kind of just aggressive little scalp longs in there. Then it also made a 3-day demand. But I had said, again, just something for you to look for on a lot of the other alts as well, that even though we had this 3-day demand in here, there was a chance it was going to come and test this 4-hour at the base here, which it's just missed. And so if you are trading alts, be conscious of that as things come down and test these 4-5-day demands. Is that quite a few alts that I've looked at have a 12-hour down here that hasn't been tested. So I do think there is a chance that maybe not on this, because this already did come very close to testing in there, but a lot of the more recent movers just come up through here. They've left trendline stops. They do have a 4-5-day demand in there, but then they've got an untested 12-hour below. So I think we might get some that are going to wick into that before moving. So they just need to be aware of that. So this I'd alerted the 4-hour, and in fact didn't quite hit. In fact, just held the 3-day, I think, in there. So a little bit harder to get in on the low time frames, but ultimately held that big weekly zone we were looking at entries off. And it's still thinking about it like DOT and Atom. I still actually would like a little bit higher, which again gives a bit more credence to a bit more of a bounce on Bitcoin. Yeah, and the only other thing I think to consider is that Sol has made its 2-month supply and 3-month supply a little bit higher. My alert's a bit higher in that anyway. I was a bit aggressive here because it also has a 2-month level from historically. So I thought that was worth watching a little bit early. This has now made a 2-week demand. Anyway, before I get carried away again, because we're now at 1 hour and 3 minutes, I want to say goodnight. And yeah, I'll come back tomorrow and do more updates for you. And go over some alts individually. So yeah, if you've got any requests, please hit me up in the Telegram channel, and or just comment on this video, and I'll kind of come and check tomorrow. And I hope you have a good evening. Good night.